There we go. Let me get this screen share. Alrighty, I hope everyone can see that okay. So today, I'm actually using a camera I hadn't planned on using because we know how it is in the world today. We have all this technology, and then when we practice and when we use it, it doesn't work like we expected it to, but that's okay. We have backups here. So the title of my session today is, Are we riding? Are you riding or are you driving? And I'm going to talk about developing a strategic talent acquisition strategy, and I added in times of uncertainty, but really this is to be used anytime, not just in times of uncertainty. I want to talk a little bit about my title first and tell a little story on myself before we get started. So I purposely G off of riding and driving, and there's a little story behind that. So it's probably been 10 years ago. My manager, and I'm going to call him Mike, had retired. He was one of my mentors, and the local economic development committee was extremely interested in a program that Mike and I had started for talent acquisition, and that was an apprenticeship program partnering with our local community college. And even though Mike had retired, he still did a good bit of community work. So they invited Mike and I to come down and do a presentation to them about what we were doing as part of our talent acquisition strategy. So I gave the presentation, and there was lots of questions at the end, and on the way out to the car, Mike says, Rita, now let me back up. Mike's from Detroit. Mike says, Rita, we have to do something about your Southern accent, because there's times when I frankly can't understand some of what you're saying. Well, I became very self-conscious about my Southern accent, and I actually hired someone to help me kind of soften that a little bit. Well, in the coming months, the head of the Economic Development Council called me back and said, Rita, we're so impressed with what you guys did. We'd like for you to come and do a presentation to the entire county council. Well, now I'm feeling a little self-conscious that perhaps folks can't understand me. And I said, well, we'll come and do it, but Mike is going to do the presentation this time. And the gentleman on the other end of the line said, Rita, we really do appreciate that, but Mike's not from around here, and we can't understand anything he says. So after that, I decided I would embrace my Southern accent. I fired the teacher that I hired to help me, and have decided to embrace it. And I'm embracing that here by dropping the G off the riding or the driving. So what do I mean by, are you riding or are you driving? Well, the fellow here on this horse is riding. He is holding on for dear life. He is going the direction that this horse is throwing him, and he is doing everything he can to stay up on this horse. Now, this is exciting. It gets the adrenaline going, and it is exciting, but he is holding on for dear life. In contrast to this person who is driving. This person is driving the horse. They are taking the horse in direction they want to take the horse. The horse is jumping on command, and they're having a more comfortable experience. So my question is, in your hiring and in your talent acquisition activities, are you riding or are you driving? Riding can be nerve-wracking. Riding can be a time of uncertainty when you're not sure you can get the talent that your organization needs to meet your customers' needs. So today, I'm going to give you a process and some things to do to make sure that you're driving when it comes to your talent acquisition strategies and activities. I first want to point out that there's a difference between talent acquisition and recruiting. Talent acquisition is really focused on long-term human resource planning, not just what we need today or what we need next week. It's focused on long-term planning. Recruiting is focused on more of a short-term tactical process. And yes, the two become intertwined, because recruiting is a part of our talent acquisition strategy, but our focus shouldn't be solely on recruiting. Before I give you the process for having a talent acquisition plan, I want to talk a little bit about branding. And my first question is, what is your employment brand? Do you know what it is? Employment branding is when you position yourself as an employer of choice. This is the reputation that your organization or your company has in the community as a place to work. And one of the questions that we should ask ourselves when we're looking at our employment brand is, why would a talented person want to start working for our organization or our company? And I'll even take that a step further. Why would a talented person want to start working for our organization, and why would they want to continue working for our organization? So we have to brand ourselves. Some of the ways that you can brand yourself, and this is not all of them, and really the pieces that you use out of my recommendations are really going to depend on your organization. The first one is your website. Sometimes when we build a website, we're really focused on customer. So the customer experience, what does the customer see? But there's a lot of potential talent or recruits for your organization that are also going to your website. There should be something on your website that gives an indication as to what your employment brand is. Some of the things that I have seen are videos where the employees are involved in a community activity, or they're given testimonials as about the organization as a place to work. The second place is social media, and I cannot stress this enough, that branding has to be done on social media. And if your company or your organization has a social media website that allows posts or comments on posts, someone has to be monitoring those all the time. Because if there's a post about your organization being a good place to work, or maybe not such a good place to work, someone needs to be responding to those. And yes, respond to your positive comments as well as the negative comments, but someone needs to be responding to those publicly, so the world sees that you're concerned and you want to make sure that it's a great place to work. Collateral materials. We don't use a lot of collateral materials anymore in the paper format. We still will use some, but still have them in an electronic format that you can give in case someone asks for them, or you can email them to potential candidates. Marketing campaigns. There is an organization in Charlotte. It's an HVAC company, and they do a really great job of marketing their organization as a place to work. Yes, the ad says that they're an HVAC company, but it's really focused on their employees and what their employees think of their employer. Job fairs are a great place to build an employment brand, and I would recommend that you don't wait till you have an opening to attend a job fair. I would attend a job fair even if I did not have openings. I may be recruiting for an upcoming busy season, but I am making contacts, and again, I'm putting that brand out there. Community events is another way that you can brand your organization, and I'm going to put that one in the same bucket as sponsorships and community involvement, which is on the other side of the slide here. You can sponsor events, you can get involved in things that are going on in your community, and that's a great way to build your employment brand. If your organization has received an award, put that award on your social media, put it on your website, put it in your collateral. Brag on your organization that you won an award. Media ads, there's lots of places we can place media ads. Yes, there are still some areas where newspapers are used for placing media ads, but there are other places such as social media. We can do sponsored ads there also. Dialogue. This is where I say develop your elevator speech for your company as a place to work. So develop that 1 or 2 sentences that explains what it's like to work at your organization. And then word of mouth. Word of mouth is one of the most important ways that you can brand your company as a place to work. And I'm making sure I'm okay on my time here. So have that elevator speech to have that dialogue and share that with word of mouth. So now that I've gone through branding, I'm going to jump into this talent acquisition process. And I'm going to go through the process here, and then I have a little slide on each one of these parts of the process. The first step is define. We want to clearly define the ideal candidate. And the second one is review your current process. Then make process adjustments, and I would add here if necessary. And then implement the process, and then evaluate your process. And this is a process that is ongoing. It's a continuous improvement process. So after we do an evaluation, we may need to redefine and review the process. So this is an ongoing process. So the first step is defining the ideal candidate. And this sounds so much easier than it really is. And the first step into defining your ideal candidate is to conduct a job analysis. A job analysis is where we're listing each task that this team member would be performing. We would be listing the necessary skills, experience that they may have. And I would really focus on, when we're listing these minimum requirements, soft skills. Do they need good oral communication skills? Do they need to be able to resolve conflict among team members? Do they need to be a good teammate? Have they worked on a team before, where teamwork is important? And then list their experience and knowledge. And really quickly, I want to give an example of a time where we made a major change in a minimum requirement. I had taken a new HR role in a very large organization, and one of the minimum requirements for an entry-level, unskilled manufacturing position was a high school diploma. We conducted job analysis. We did testing for basic skills and determined that that was a minimum requirement that really was not required for this position. We were looking for more of a set of soft skills than we were for any specific education. And we changed our definition of the ideal candidate and opened up a huge applicant pool. Once you've done your job analysis and you've determined your minimum requirements, the next thing you're going to want to do is review your job descriptions and make any necessary edits to those. So when we make changes to jobs, we want to make sure that that job description is updated. That job description is also what we're going to use to pin or to write our ad that we're going to place to recruit. So the next step is to review your process. And I'm going to talk about this in terms of a two-step action. The first one, I want you to review your recruiting process itself, and then I want you to review the candidate process. And the recruiting process here, I'm referring to the entire process, from the time you identify a job opening to the time that you have someone on board. And the second one is the process that the candidate goes through. My recommendation for going through this is to create a process map. And you don't need fancy software to do a process map. A simple Excel spreadsheet will do. And in the next two slides, I'll show you another process that you can use too. This is just a very simple recruiting process that someone has mapped. And you can see it's listed step 1, step 2, step 3. They've color-coded theirs as to who does which step. Mapping your current process is important because we need to know where we're at today. What does the process look like today? I will caution against the urge to make process changes before you have finished the map. You want to make sure that your map is complete before you start making any changes, because as you map things out later, that might impact that change that you were thinking about making. So map out your process. You can even take this a little step further, and in each box, you can put how much time it takes to complete that particular step. Then in between the boxes where there are arrows, you could list the time between the steps. And this will help you identify where you have bottlenecks in your recruiting process. So my recommendation is to map your current state. And I'm going to take just a step back. I understand you guys talked about a lot about the COVID impact yesterday, but I'm going to take just a step back really quick and talk about how COVID has had an impact on our recruiting and actually probably has had an impact on this process. So we probably had a process in place and we've had to make a few changes because of COVID, and I'm going to touch on those for just a second. COVID has impacted our hiring in several ways. It has impacted our application process. You may have in the past accepted paper applications where the candidate came to your location and completed a paper application. In some cases, we've had to move to online applications. And a lot of our members here are finding that the candidates don't have the technology or the computer skills to complete those applications, and that is creating some issues. So they've had to be creative with the application process. One local company uses our parking lot. So they hold their job fair here in our parking lot. You pull up, you get a clipboard with your application on it. They even have coffee. There's a place in our parking lot for them to go sit in their cars and complete their application, so they can do that completely socially distanced here. The next one is the interviewing process. That has been impacted by COVID also, because typically we think about interviews being face-to-face, and we have had to conduct a lot of interviews virtually, and I've seen some very creative things where that's just not the best option. I have seen plexiglass dividers used where you need to interview face-to-face. And then the onboarding process. Once we have interviewed and hired someone, COVID has impacted our onboarding process. It's even impacted the way that we handle some federal documents. And the best example I can think of there is the E-Verify process. And yes, I realize not all states are required to comply with E-Verify, but there have even been some changes from the Department of Homeland Security that says we no longer have to, well, there's an end date to it, but right now we don't have to view those original documents. So it's impacted our onboarding process. So I share that to say that once you develop a process, that's why this is a continuous cycle. This is why we have to continually be looking at it, because things change. And COVID has had a huge impact on hiring in the past year. So now I want to talk a little bit about where are you recruiting? And I want to break this up into two sections. You can recruit internally and you can recruit externally. And you need to identify in your plan where you're going to be recruiting. And it's important to do that before you have an opening or before a busy season is upon you. The first one is employee referrals. You might even offer a finder's fee or a little bonus if you hire someone and they stay a certain amount of time. Inside moonlighting. This is where you have an employee that has a desire to move into another role or perhaps be promoted, and you allow them to moonlight on that job to learn some skills or to learn the job prior to being moved to it. I'm going to talk about job bidding and job posting together because they're a lot alike. Bidding is where you allow current employees to come and express an interest in a position before it comes open. And job posting is when you allow them to express an interest after a job comes open. And those are often on internal job boards. And then succession planning, we should be using to fill our higher level positions where we can promote current employees into those roles. So where should we be recruiting externally, or where can we recruit externally? Well, we can advertise, and as I mentioned with our employment branding, yes, we can run some newspaper ads, and there still are some small areas in our community where that's the best place to recruit, is one of the small newspapers. Community awareness, this is back to your employment branding. We can use temporary agencies, but I'm going to recommend that you develop a relationship with your temporary agency that you're going to use prior to you needing someone. Have them visit your facility, have them go through your hiring process. but develop your procedures with them and a relationship with them prior to you needing someone. Educational institutions are a great place to recruit from. This would be your local community colleges, your technical schools. This might even be your local high schools that you're recruiting from. Former employees, we probably all at some point in the past year have had to lay off or furlough employees, or you've had someone leave your organization. Don't be shy about reaching back out to them, even if they've found other employment, to see if they're interested in coming back to work at your organization. Government agencies, this is going to vary from state to state, county to county, sometimes even city to city, what's available. But there are lots of federal and state programs to help you recruit. And then job boards such as Indeed and ZipRecruiter are also good places for you to list your ads. Social media is a great place to recruit. You can do paid ads. You can do paid ads on LinkedIn and other places, but sometimes just a simple post is a great way to recruit. Hold an open house. Allow folks to come into your facility, see what the work is about, meet some of your employees who are there now. Personal networking, that's just when you're in a social situation or I'm saying this probably pre-COVID, in a business after hours meeting, mention that you have openings that you're hiring for. Outplacement services. Identify who the outplacement services in your area is and go ahead and reach out to them, because you never know when an organization or area is going to announce a tremendous layoff. And we just had that happen here in our community. An employer, and I'm going to call them an employer of choice, announced that they would be closing in April and they are going to displace almost 500 employees. So companies are reaching out to them now through outplacement to try to hire their employees. HR associations, these are great places to reach out to. And if you go to the national HR website of SHRM, S-H-R-M, there's a directory there of every HR association that's affiliated with them all over the world. So reach out to them. Employers associations, we're an employers association here at the Employers Network, and we have people reach out to us all the time, sometimes informally looking for someone, and then sometimes formally to do some recruiting. And then veterans organizations, reach out to them also, because there are a lot of veterans that have skills, wonderful skills, high-level skills that can be transferred into the workplace. So I want to look at the candidates process really quickly. Map your candidates process. And I use this picture because I wanted to point out you don't even really need an Excel spreadsheet. I love to do these maps with Post-it notes because you can move them around. If you get something in the wrong place, it's just easy to pick it up and move it. Know what their process is. Some questions to ask when you're doing that is my process difficult to understand? And yes, I have seen some hiring processes that are very difficult to understand. Where do candidates opt out? So do they start filling out an application and then they ghost you, or they leave the process? Is it taking too long for you to hire them? Are all the steps that you've got in that process needed, and are they in the right order? Which steps take too much time, and how can we reduce that time? One organization here locally has recently identified that at a certain point in their online application, probably close to 50% of their applicants drop out of the process. So they really pared down their application to just a few questions that were really important, and they have been able to really impact that number. Found this little cute cartoon to talk about the recruiting process here. Finally made its way through the process, through your recruiting process, but I'm retired now. So just make sure that your recruiting process is not taking so long that they have found another position or they have given up on your organization. Once you build your plan, I'm going to say build some alternate plans. And I'm addressing this right now specifically related to the COVID crisis, but I have built alternate plans coming out of recessions, when a new competitor comes to town. There's lots of things that could cause a reason for you to build an alternate plan. Right now with COVID, it could be that business returns faster than you expect it to. And we all hope that happens, but we've got to be ready with the talent acquisition strategy, or we're not going to be able to meet the needs of our customers. You got to have a plan too. Business returns slowly, so it returns much slower than we expected. And then plan 3, your business returns, but in an off season. We are seeing a tremendous amount of that here in our organization. Months that we would expected to have been very low in revenue have been actually record-breaking in some months. Other months that typically are very high in revenue have been very low, or in some cases almost zero. So have a plan for each one of those things that could impact your organization and your ability to provide your customers with what they need. Once you've got this process in place, so once you have mapped out your process, you've taken out the waste out of that, you've said, what do we really need? What does that ideal candidate look like? Then you're going to implement your new process. So you're going to put it in place and you're going to monitor that as you move through it. What I mean by evaluating the process, it really has several things that you're going to do. The number one thing you can do to help really hone in and define your process is to know which sources yielded the most qualified candidates. So you'll need to start tracking how many candidates did I receive from this temp agency and how many of them were qualified, and once I hired them, they were successful in our organization. How many candidates did we get from a certain government agency, and were they successful within our organization? And you can begin to map out and statistically look at, where am I getting the most qualified candidates? So where should I spend my time? And in some cases, my advertising dollars, because in some cases we're having to pay for these things. If we're posting ads on Indeed, or if we're posting a paid ad on LinkedIn or ZipRecruiter, we're having to pay for those. So this will help you streamline some of your hiring costs. Know the total cost of hiring a qualified candidate. This can be a little more difficult, and this will take, again, some very dedicated time for you to identify every step in that process and what is it costing you. So know the cost of recruiting your qualified candidates. So I'm going to go back and recap a little bit of the process that I recommend employers use. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define the ideal candidate. And again, that is our first step and our most important step. We have to get that right. Then we're going to review our current process. We're going to review it in 2 stages. We're going to review our internal hiring process. We're going to look at where we're recruiting, where can we be recruiting, what does that whole hiring process look like. We're going to make adjustments if we need to. And I would say you're probably going to be making adjustments each time you look at this plan, because you're going to find a more efficient way to do something, maybe a better recruiting source, maybe there's something new on the market, but make process adjustments and don't be afraid to do that. Think of this as a continuous improvement activity. Once you've got that, you're going to implement your process, and then once you're through that, you're going to evaluate your process and really kind of start this all over again. But develop a strategic process for bringing talent into your organization. Know how long it takes you from the time you identify you need someone to the time you bring someone on board. This will help you respond to fluctuation in market demand a good bit faster. So I'm going to go back and ask the question that I asked on the first 2 slides. Are you riding or are you driving? And where our talent acquisition strategies are concerned, we really need to be driving, because riding can put us in a place where we are not able to meet our customers' needs because we don't have the talent in place at the right time. All right, so I'm going to open it up for some questions, and I'm going to stop this screen share so I can actually see the questions in the chat. All right. So what questions do you have? And I'll entertain any questions around hiring or recruiting or anything of that nature.
And Rita, we can still see your screen, so if you want to click the stop sharing button at the bottom.
There we go. Did that help?
Perfect.
All righty.
And I see a couple of people commenting saying that the temp agencies have helped us in getting through the process of filtering out the keepers from the non-keepers.
Yes, I would agree with that. And when you're looking at using temporary employees, make sure that you're figuring in that cost or that markup cost to the temporary agency in your recruiting cost. But it definitely will help you. You can kind of take the employee for a test drive for a little bit. But it is a great way to do some filtering. And again, I would suggest developing a really good relationship with a temporary agency or maybe 2 agencies in your area prior to your need for talent.
And it looks like we have someone here asking about what organization you are with again, Rita.
I am with an organization called the Employers Network. There are employers associations across the U.S. and in our case, we are a not-for-profit organization. We were started 60 years ago by a group of business leaders in our area, and our mission is very simple. Our mission is to assist employers in attracting, developing, engaging, and retaining their talent. I see a question about the $15 minimum wage. I do think that the $15 minimum wage will affect hiring. I think it's going to have some effects that are even further reaching than just hiring. The minimum wage has not been increased since 2009, so it has been a long time since we've had an increase. And really, in an ideal world, the minimum wage should be increased and tracking with some inflation number or some cost of living number. And that's not happened. And it's really a negative impact on employers when we take a tremendous jump. And if we go from $7.25 to $15 an hour overnight, that's going to have a tremendous impact, not only on hiring, but on a lot of small businesses too. So we can all just kind of wait and see if they're going to take that jump all at once or if it's going to be a graduated increase, but it's going to have quite a far-reaching impact.
And we'll give everyone here just a minute to get in any of their last-minute questions.
While we're waiting on last-minute questions, I'll share an experience with the mapping process. I took a position in a very large automotive supplier. This has been many years ago. And when I arrived there, the time to fill an open position, the average was 118 days. So from the time a hiring manager said I have an opening, it was 118 days was the average. That's not acceptable. So we mapped out our process and we began to look at where our bottlenecks were, where were steps that maybe we didn't need in the hiring process, was there any steps we could do simultaneously, and we were able to bring that 118 days to less than 30, and that was an average day to fill for all positions, including management positions. So the process mapping really works to find in your process where you can reduce that time. And sometimes when we need somebody quickly, that's extremely important.
All right, and I'm not seeing any other questions coming in here. So thank you so much, Rita. And if anyone has any other questions that they think of later, feel free to reach out to IFAI and we will connect you with Rita directly.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me today.